quality prints of the backyard photos from the National Archives back in the early 70s. Since then, I have studied them extensively. Along with other researchers, I have found many things about these photos which make me highly suspicious of them. There are many aspects which seem to point to fabrication.
You mean the pictures may have been faked somehow?
Yes, exactly. I would especially point to problems with the body of the figure in the photograph, the rifle, the telescopic sight, Oswald's face, the picture's backgrounds. Let me explain.
And explain he did. Here's what White and other researchers have discovered about the famous photograph. We'll start with the figure in the incriminating backyard pictures. Notice the odd leaning posture of the figure in the photograph. When this picture is printed backwards, the lean becomes even more pronounced. Mr. White's studies indicate that the figure's center of gravity lie outside its weight-bearing foot, a physical impossibility. Then there are problems with the figure's proportions. Here are the two photos reportedly found in the Payne garage. The most famous one, the one on the left, is known as the Warren Commission Exhibit 133A. The other is 133B. Notice that while the figures in these photos have been brought to the same size and the red lines mark the position of the knees and head, the figure in 133A appears to have a larger head, but a smaller body than 133B. 133B, on the other hand, seems to have a smaller head, yet the body appears larger, especially since the feet reach outside the picture, indicating that the figure is closer to the camera. Here we see the figure's knees and toes in the same place, yet the figure on the right appears to be about 6 inches shorter than the one on the left. Notice, too, that the shadows of the figures in the photos fall in different directions, although reportedly the two pictures were made within seconds of each other. 133A's shadow is in a 10 o'clock position, while 133B's shadow is more in a 12 o'clock position. In what we call 133C, the third photograph, only discovered 13 years after the assassination, White pointed out that the figure's shadow again falls in the 10 o'clock position. But while the figure seems to be in the same position, the shadow reaches up the fence in the background, yet appears to be cast by a figure which is much shorter. In 133A, White noticed the upper left arm was much too short and the elbow abnormally high, perhaps as much as 6 to 8 inches above the waist. In this photo, there is simply a hand gripping the rifle. In dozens of tests trying to recreate this picture, no one has been able to duplicate this unnatural posture. Here, White has taken the backyard photo 133A and matched it with a reconstruction of the picture. He made this comparison overlay with 133A and a photo of a man striking a similar pose. After matching the size of the rifles in both pictures, White noticed that one shoulder is much lower than the other. If the right shoulder, arm, and rifle all matched up, you would expect the left shoulder and arm to also match, but it doesn't. Further evidence of possible sloppy touch-up work on this picture is here in this blow-up of 133A. Notice the fingers on the left hand appear normal, slender fingers with clearly defined fingernails. But on the right hand, the fingertips appear to be missing. There's no sign of fingernails on these stubby fingers. Mr. White also noticed a wristwatch on the figure's left wrist. Oddly enough, however, no one recalled Lee Oswald owning such a watch, and no wristwatch was found among his possessions, either at his rooming house or at the Payne home. In addition to problems with body shapes and a vanishing wristwatch, researchers have found problems with the rifle. The Warren Commission puzzled assassination researchers by publishing this ad, which it stated was a duplicate of the magazine ad from which Oswald reportedly ordered a rifle. Why show the public a duplicate when the original ad was readily available, researchers asked. Later investigation showed that the February 1963 ad supposedly used by Oswald offered a 36-inch rifle. The rifle now in the National Archives, identified as the assassination weapon, is 40 inches long. To hide this discrepancy, the government panel simply published a later ad which indeed advertised a 40-inch rifle. This discrepancy in rifle length is mirrored in discrepancies discovered by White. He found that when the figure in photograph 133A was blown up to match Oswald's known height of 5 foot 9 inches, the length of the rifle was entirely too long. And when the rifles were brought to the same size, matching its official 40.2-inch length, Oswald appears 6 inches too short. But an even stranger problem exists with the rifle's telescopic scope. White discovered that in 133A, the clearest and most famous of the backyard photos, the rear end of the scope appears to be missing. He even found wrinkles in the pants where the end of the scope should be. Mr. White concluded that this was solid evidence that the photo was doctored in some way. But the evidence of shortened arms, stubby fingers, and distorted rifles pales next to what White and others discovered about Oswald's face. Remember that Oswald told Dallas police that someone had pasted his head onto the incriminating picture. Over the years, assassination researchers, beginning with Fred Newcomb of California, noticed that while Oswald's chin in the backyard photo is broad and flat, other pictures, such as this official Dallas police mugshot, show Oswald had a sharp, cleft chin. Today, all researchers agree with Oswald that the backyard picture indicates some sort of photographic chin transplant. The idea that Oswald's face was grafted onto the incriminating photo is reinforced by the discovery of a line which interrupts the continuity of the photographic grain. This line stretches from one side of the neck under the lower lip to the other side of the neck. Could this indicate the point where Oswald's upper face was spliced onto another body? A panel of government photo analysts lamely tried to explain away this anomaly as water spots on the negative. One panel member even said it may have been a line of pimples. But Mr. White did not rest his conclusion solely on an odd line of pimples. Here he has made a red transparency of 133B. And here's a blue transparency of 133A, the other original backyard photo. Supposedly, these are two separate pictures taken moments apart after moving the camera around while advancing the film. If they're laid on top of each other, nothing in either photo should match identically. Yet incredibly, we find that nothing indeed matches except for Oswald's face. His face in this overlay is purple, indicating that the red and blue transparencies match precisely at that point. This identical matching of faces is considered impossible with a handheld camera taking a series of photographs. Mr. White and others see it as further confirmation that Oswald's face was pasted over another photo. Then there is the added problem of shadows on the face and neck. We have already seen that problems exist with the direction of the body's shadows on the ground in the backyard photos. Mr. White points out that in the first picture, a V-shaped shadow falls under Oswald's nose, seeming to confirm his wife's statement that the photos were made about noon with the sun high in the sky. Yet on the next photo, the V-shaped shadow remains identical despite the fact that Oswald's head has tilted to the left. Also notice that while the shadow under the nose indicates a sun directly above, there's a heavy shadow on the right side of his neck and sunlight on the left, indicating light from yet another direction. Mr. White reported inconsistencies with shadows throughout the backyard photos. Here in 133B, we see sunlight coming from the figure's left, throwing shadows